What's good, YouTubers and YouTubettes? This is JBsports back again with another one. Breaking news! ESPN MX is reporting that Canelo Alvarez will defend his WBC, WBA, IBF, and WBO super middleweight titles versus WBC middleweight champion Jermall, Lions only Charlo. The fight is expected to take place in September, Mexican Independence Day weekend. Now, a lot of people wanted Canelo Alvarez to take on his number one contender in the WBC, interim WBC super middleweight champion, David Benavidez, aka the Mexican Monster. And yours truly believes that Canelo Alvarez should be fighting David Benavidez instead of Jermall Charlo, who has not fought in the super middleweight division. Now, a couple of days ago, Michael Carpenter came out and said that Canelo Alvarez had narrowed his list down to two opponents: WBC cruiserweight champion Badou Jack and WBC middleweight champion Jermall Lions only Charlo. Him and his team ultimately decided to take on Jermall Charlo. That fight has been percolating for about 3 or 4 years. The boxing fans have been wanting to see that matchup. And 2023 is going to be known as, finally, fights that we wanted to see several years back are now coming to fruition. Now we have Errol Spence Jr. taking on Chance Crawford. That fight had been percolating for at least 5 years. And now we have a fight lined up between Canelo Alvarez versus Jermall Charlo. That fight had been percolating for at least 4 years. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. Now, Charlo and Canelo, that fight was first talked about when both of them was campaigning at 160. I know that Canelo and Jermall, other twin, Jermall Charlo, that fight was talked about at 154. So Canelo and the Charlo twins' names have been leaked for several years now. And finally, we're going to get a fight involving Canelo Alvarez versus Jermall Charlo. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. Now, I know a lot of boxing fans are going to shit on this matchup, saying that Jermall Charlo has been inactive for the last 2 years. He don't deserve the fight. That David Benavidez should get first dibs on Canelo Alvarez for September. But that's not going to happen. And nobody should be surprised that that's not going to happen, because Canelo Alvarez has said this numerous times that he is not fighting another Mexican fighter. He hasn't fought a Mexican fighter since 2017 when he defeated Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. In the lead up to that fight, it was a lot of trash talk. It was a lot of bad blood. And you put that on top of the fact that Canelo Alvarez's idol is Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. I think that whole event in the lead up left a bad taste in Canelo Alvarez's mouth. And I think that he has stood 10 toes down and has reaffirmed that he is not fighting any Mexican fighters. Now, he's come out here recently when asked about a potential matchup with David Benavidez and says that he's been saying that he don't care, that he'll fight anybody. But basically, I don't think that's the case. I think we got to go by what his actions is. And he hasn't fought a Spanish fighter, a Mexican fighter, since 2017. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. You know what I think gonna happen? I think he's gonna fight Charlo in September, and he's gonna fight Edgar Berlanga in May of 2024. I think these are gonna be the next two fights for Canelo Alvarez. Edgar Berlanga is a Puerto Rican. They'll reunite that Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry, and they'll do big numbers over there on the Zone pay-per-view. But this fight here between him and Jermall Charlo will be on Showtime pay-per-view. This is another big fight that the PBC has landed. The PBC has made their case that they're the number one boxing entity in the sport, putting on the biggest and best events. Look at Tank versus Ryan Garcia that did 1.2 million pay-per-view buys, which catapulted Gervonta Tank Davis as being the face of boxing, the cash cow of the sport. And now they have a fight coming up July 29th involving the #1 and #2 pound-for-pound fighter, Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. The winner of that fight will be the unquestioned #1 pound-for-pound fighter in boxing. And now they've landed the former cash cow of boxing, the former face of boxing, Canelo Alvarez, as he takes on Jermall Charlo. People got to understand that Canelo Alvarez's last 3 fights have not done great numbers on the zone. The fight with Dimitri Bivol did mediocre numbers on pay-per-view. The fight with John Ryder did, from what I heard, 230 to 235,000 pay-per-view buys, according to one report. Now, I've heard another report say the fight did around 150 to 200,000 pay-per-view buys versus John Ryder. You take either one of those numbers and say that they're true, those are bad numbers for Canelo Alvarez. When he did 800,000 pay-per-view buys when he fought Caleb Plant on Showtime pay-per-view. The Zone pay-per-view has shown not to be the greatest platform to put on pay-per-view fights. Now, it's still early. It's still in the infancy stage of the Zone going to pay-per-view. Maybe they learn from their mistakes, learn that they need to put on better production and do a better job of promoting the fight in the lead up to a pay-per-view fight. Maybe that'll be the case. We will see what happens. We will see what transpires. But as of now, you look at the pay-per-view events that they put on here in the U.S., and they have been done, and they have been producing mediocre numbers. And that's a damn shame when it was involving the #1 fighter in the face of boxing that was at the headline of those fights. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. Canelo Alvarez versus Jermall Charlo is an interesting fight due to the fact that Jermall Charlo has been inactive for the last 2 years, and in his last fight versus Montiel, he dominated that fight, but he did take some punishment in that fight, got hit more in that fight than we've seen in any of his previous fights. He's shown a lot of vulnerability in that fight. He's definitely going to have to be a better version of himself than when he fought Montiel, but I think he will rise to the occasion. This is a fight that he's been gunning for a lot of years now, or at least the last 4 years now, and he'll be up to the task. I think we'll see the best version of Jermall Charlo. He has one of the best jabs in boxing, so that will be a problem. That will be a sticking point for Canelo Alvarez and his team to try to take away the jab of Jermall lines on the Charlo. He has a great 1-2 jab right hand. He has a good uppercut too, and he has real good power. That's going to be a good fight. If Jermall Charlo is not rusty, if Jermall Charlo is focused. Jermall Charlo has been going through it outside of that square circle in his personal life. He's going to have to overcome that and be ready and focused. He has one of the best trainers in boxing, Ronnie Shields. So if they're well prepared, if he's on his A game, that should be a tremendous fight between Jermall Charlo and Canelo Alvarez, who in my opinion is not the same fighter that defeated Triple G in the second fight, or the guy that stopped Billy Joe Saunders, or the guy that made Callum Smith wave that white flag when he stopped trying to win in that fight. He won a 12-round decision, but it was obviously after about 4 or 5 rounds that Callum Smith was not trying to win that fight because of the devastating power and the devastating punishment that was put on him put on him from Canelo Alvarez. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. But due to the fact that I believe that Canelo Alvarez has slipped a little bit, and if Jermall Charlo can show that he is that guy that beat Sergey Derevchenko, the guy that knocked out and put to sleep like he had gave him some NyQuil, J. Rock Williams, if that guy shows up, we're in for a great matchup. Now, where would this fight land? I think the likely destinations are Cowboy Stadium or T-Mobile Arena. If it's in Cowboy Stadium, I think they could do at least 70 to 80,000 fans that will be in attendance for that fight if it takes place in Cowboy Stadium. You have the people down here in Houston that'll definitely drive down there to Dallas to see him fight Canelo Alvarez. And you have a huge Messi contingent in Dallas, in Houston, and in San Antonio that will be in attendance for that fight. So it would do great numbers in Cowboy Stadium. Or they can put it in T-Mobile Arena, as we have witnessed several big fights from Canelo Alvarez in that venue. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. Follow me on Facebook, Gerard Briscoe. Like, share, and subscribe to JB Sports, the man, the myth, the legend, and I holla.